So this video is about APA style. That means it's the publication style of the American Psychological Association. Specifically, we're talking about the 7th edition guidelines. For Central Penn students, the easiest way to find APA information is in Blackboard. You're going to click the Library tab and then click the Academic Resources tab. And then there is a box for APA citation and format, and if you click this link, you will get right into our guide. The other way to get to this information is through guides.centralpenn.edu. On the Home tab, the first thing listed under the quick links is the APA Style and Citation Guide. It is also listed under the Research Help and Tutorials. There's an Academic Integrity Guide, which sort of feeds into this. And there is the APA Style and Citation Guide. So you just click that. The guide opens up with what has changed since the 6th edition. There were a significant number of changes with the 7th edition. The main one is that the APA basically acknowledged that not all students are writing for publication, so they made a student version that's a little bit easier to use than the regular if you're submitting for publication guidelines. So in a student paper, you're not going to have running heads, you're not going to have abstracts or keywords. We do note in here that if your instructor tells you to do anything different, do whatever your instructor says. If for some reason you do need to use the old rules, contact the library. We can get you the information to the guide for the 6th edition rules. So right on this Home tab, I guess you would say, we have an annotated sample paper from the APA. It's a PDF. If you open that up, basically it has an example of what your paper should look like, and it has all kinds of notes. Actually, we'll go ahead and open it up. Of common things that you need to have in an APA paper. We also have a document that's a sample paper. We highly encourage students to use this. Basically, it's already formatted for you, so you can just download this. We're going to download it. And you're going to click that yellow Enable Editing button, but basically it already has your page numbers in there. It has the proper format. It has the information that you're going to need. You just highlight and type in your information. So it has the double spacing. There's no extra space in between paragraphs. The sample paper also includes heading levels. You probably will not be using headings unless you're writing a really long paper. So if you're not using them, just take them out. If your professor is requiring them, they're in here so that you can use them. Your reference page is going to start on a separate page, and it has those hanging indents. So again, you just sort of write in the author's name of what you're doing. If you don't want to use the sample paper, or if you've already started your paper, the Format Basics tabs goes over what format you should have set in your paper. It has the text. It has the screenshots this is from the desktop version of Word, and this is the Word Online version. I do encourage people to use the desktop version, so go ahead and open up, if you've opened it up in Word Online, click the button to say Edit in the desktop application. It's a little bit easier, I think. So this basic format tab has everything that you're supposed to have. So all the information you're supposed to have on your title page. You have your first page of your essay, you have your references page, and it has the different sections that you should have in your APA paper. So usually you have a title page. Check with your instructor. Sometimes if you have a very short paper or essay, they don't require the title page. Then you're going to have the text of your paper. That's the body of your work. Then you're going to have references, again, starting on a separate page. And then appendices. Again, you probably aren't going to have appendices similar to headings. This is probably only necessary if you've got a large project that's due. But if you do have them, they're going to come after your references in their own section. Underneath Format Basics, we do have an example of annotated bibliographies. We were asked about this a lot, and APA previously hadn't really specified how they wanted it formatted. So it was kind of a hodgepodge of things, but now they actually do have recommendations. Again, we have the sample paper that you can download, hit enable editing, and you can just, put in your information. The annotated bibliography, so the format's a bit different than a regular paper in that you start with your reference and everything's in this hanging indent format. And then after your reference, you're going to have your annotation or your notes that correspond to that reference. It's a very handy research tool. Citation basics. So we start off with when should you cite. So you should cite whenever you're quoting a source, but you also cite when you are summarizing the source or paraphrasing the source. Anytime you're using an image, you should also have a citation for that. So that can be graphs, that can be statistics. If you're not creating it, you need to cite it. So where do you cite? You should cite in two different places in your paper. At the end of your paper, you should have the full reference in your references section. And then you should also have your in-text citation within the text of your paragraph of your paper. So immediately after you borrow the material, you should have an in-text citation. A lot of times we see these papers where every paragraph has a citation at the end of the paragraph. That's a big flag for us because that should almost never happen. So you should have in-text citations throughout your paragraphs. And a citation at the end of the paragraph implies that you only borrowed material in the last sentence of the paragraph. If you are finding that you are writing like that, I highly encourage you to make an appointment either with the library or with the Learning Center to learn on how to integrate your source material a little bit better into your writing. When is it okay to skip the citation? So when you're stating your own opinion, when it's information that you've generated or information that's about you, you don't have to cite that. You also don't have to cite information that is common knowledge, meaning it's non-controversial, it's a fact that most people agree on, or if you're seeing the same information in multiple sources. Okay, now we're going into references. We start with the reference because all the information that you're going to need to do your in-text citation comes from the reference. This is why it's a good idea to do a bibliography as you research. It saves you a lot of time for finding the information for your sources later when you're actually writing your paper. It's very frustrating. Everybody's done it where, they just go and write and then all of a sudden they have to go backwards and try to find out where they got their information. Generally, you're going to have an author or a creator, so who created this work. And then you're also going to have a date, and you're going to use as much of the date as you have. So sometimes there's just a year. For example, with books, usually it's just a year. For articles and websites, you might have a month and a day. So if you have a month and a day provided, in addition to the year, you use them all in this format, the year, comma, month, day format. We'll get into websites in a little bit. So title, that should be self-explanatory. What is the title of the particular thing that you are looking at? The source is where can the material be found. So for articles, for instance, you're going to have the article title, but then your source is going to be where the article appeared. So what journal, what magazine, what newspaper. For sources, you also will have a DOI or a URL sometimes. Not often with print do you get either of these, but with articles, you're usually going to have a digital object identifier that is a unique number specifically for that article, and they are considered stable, where URLs can break down. They're generally not stable. So when you have a DOI, you use the DOI. If you don't have a DOI, but you do have the URL, then you use the URL. If you have neither, then you have neither. And we have an example here of an article, and this is the basic information that you're going to use in most of your references. So you're going to have the author's information, their name. You're going to have their publication date, and you're going to have the title. So that's generic for just about anything that you're citing. You're going to have at least that information. For the article in particular, you're going to have the title of the article. Then you're going to have the title of the journal in italics with the volume and issue number and the page numbers. And then the DOI or the URL if you have them. Usually finding or figuring out how to set up the author is pretty easy. It is their last name and their initials. So if they have just one initial, you just use the first initial. If they have their first and their middle initials, you use their first and their middle initials. If they have more initials, you include them. Where it gets complicated maybe is if they have titles. If they have a title like doctor or president, you are not going to include that title in the citation. If they have suffixes, like they're a junior or a senior or they're the second and third, you go ahead and include that. The other time authors can get a little weird is if they have a unique, inseparable name. You're going to leave it intact. So Lady Gaga, for instance, you're not going to turn that into Gaga, L. It's always going to be Lady Gaga. This comes up a lot with if you're citing social media where they're not using their personal name or a name per se, but they're using a username. So a username, for instance, would stay intact. You would just use the username as it is, no matter how weird it looks. If you have several authors, you are going to list them all on your reference page so in this instance, there's 4 authors. So you list them all and you put a little ampersand before the last person. The only time that changes is for your reference page is when there are more than 20 authors. And in that case, you have to list all 19 authors, then an ellipse before naming the last author. So hopefully that does not come up too often because that would get tedious. Groups you can have, sometimes it's not a person necessarily that's an author, but a group such as an organization, a corporation, or a government body, you go ahead and list them as the author. Special roles. So if you have an edited book, you're going to include that special role information after the person's name. So ed with a dot means editor. In this case, we're citing a film and we're citing the director. So we're going to include that information in parentheses after their name. If there is no author, now if anonymous is listed as the author, you can go ahead and use anonymous as the name of the author, as in this case. If there truly is no author, then you actually skip the author part and you skip to just using the title of the work followed by the date. And for dates, again, you're going to use as much of the date as you have. If there truly is no date, that's when you use N.D. which stands for no date. From references, we go into how to do the in-text citation. So general rules for all of the in-text citations are you're going to have the information of the author. In this case, it's an organization that's an author. You're going to have a date, which is the year. You don't have to put the month and the day here. You just have to put the year. And then you're going to have the specific part. So usually that's a page number. But occasionally you don't have page numbers. For instance, if you're looking at something on a website, you might not have page numbers, so you'll have to use sections or paragraph numbers or chapters. But basically you want to tell people where that information came from specifically, especially if it's a quote. If it is audiovisual material like a film, you're going to use a timestamp. There are 2 ways to do your in-text citation. You can do a narrative in-text citation, which basically includes the information within the text of your writing. So Spencer, in 2006, you have that in parentheses, notes that it is acceptable, quote, and then you have your specific part at the end. So notice for your in-text citation, you have your quote, then you have your parentheses with your in-text citation, and then you have the period. Sometimes people try to put the period first or put the quotes after the in-text citation. So that's the way it goes. For the parenthetical citation, you have all the information after your quote. So here's your quote with your ending quote mark, then your parentheses with your author's last name, the year, and the specific part. And notice, okay, so if it's only information from one page, that's when you use a P. If it's covering multiple pages, you use PP. Organizations as authors, you can abbreviate them, but you do have to introduce them. So introduce the abbreviation so that people know what you're referring to later on. So your first time you're using, say, for example, World Health Organization, you can have, this is your narrative example where you're incorporating that information into your text. But in parentheses, you're introducing the abbreviation here with your year, your date, and then have your specific part at the end before your period that ends the sentence. In this case, we've got paragraphs that we're citing. Or you can do it all in one for your parenthetical for your parenthetical citation. You have your quote, and then you have the full name of the organization spelled out, and then in brackets you have the abbreviation that you're going to use for the rest of your paper, the year, and the paragraph information. For an unknown author, so this is not, so anonymous can be used if that's actually listed, but where it's not known and you're using, so in your reference it's going to start with the first word, the title of the thing that you're looking at. You're going to use the first word or two of that title in the in-text citation. So, and it's going to be in quotes. So you will have a corresponding reference that starts with students on your reference page. And then you have the year and personal communication. So remember, the main reason that you have citations is so that your reader can find the information that you are using so that they can use it somewhere else. So in the case of a personal communication, which is, like I've emailed somebody or you've had an interview with someone, that is not recoverable information, meaning that I'm the only one that has that information. So you're not going to have something listed on your reference page because your reader is not going to be able to find that to refer to it. You are still going to put it in your in-text citation, and this is the way to do it. You're going to put your information, your first initial and last name, comma, personal communication, and the date that personal communication occurred. Secondary sources. This is what happens when you have a source that quotes another source. You always cite the source that you have. So unless you're going to go and find that original source, you're going to cite the thing that you have in your hand. So in this case, we have something from Shine that was written in 2017. So on our reference page, we're going to have something for Shine. But we are not going to have something for Grieve. So Shine is quoting Grieve, basically, and we're including that in our paper. So you have that Grieve said it in 2015, that's the original date that he had it, as cited in the thing that I have in my hand, which is Shine. And again, you cite the information that you have. So if, for example, you have no idea when Grieve made his speech, you don't have to include a date. Don't try to figure it out or guess at it. You just put Grieve speech and then as cited in Shine. And this is the publication date of the thing that you are looking at. So this table at the bottom basically has the way the authors can be set up in your in-text citation, whether it's a parenthetical citation, that's the one that comes at the end where all the information is in the parenthetical citation, or narrative, where you're incorporating at least some of the information into the way you write your sentence. So one author is pretty simple. Two authors, you're going to separate them with ampersand. Three or more authors, you only have to list the first author, and then you can use et al. So that example, et al. Sorry, there is a period after that. So that example where you had more than 20 authors, you only have to list the first one in your in-text citation. There's other examples of how to introduce an organization and an abbreviation. And there are examples for if you have authors with the same last name, or if you have sources by unauthor within the same year. That's the only time you're going to add a letter to your date, basically. Hopefully that won't come up too often. I will want to point out, though, that what is missing in these examples is the specific part. This table is basically focusing on the format for the authors, and it's not really incorporating the whole in-text citation. But just keep in mind that after these years, after these dates, there should be a specific part, like a page number. Now we're going to go into some specific examples for the types of sources that you are probably going to use. So we're going to go into articles first, because hopefully most of what you're citing are articles. So general information, general format for a reference for an article, you're going to have the author's last name, their first initial, their middle initial, the year the article is published in parentheses, the title of the article, and then the title of the journal, the volume number and issue number for the journal in italics, the pages and pages, and the DOI or URL if it's there. And we're kind of emphasizing that your reference and your in-text citation should always refer to each other. So if I have an in-text citation for Bishop, I better have a reference that starts with Bishop. One other thing I will point out, this might become more common as more publications move online. Sometimes you'll see in the table of contents that it's listed as Article 5 or an article number. You can include the article number instead of the page number in your reference. But in your in-text citation, you should still have a page number. So if you're opening up something as a PDF, it should usually have page numbers. So page numbers for the in-text citation, go ahead and use article numbers in the reference. I'm going to skip over library databases for now and go into books and ebooks because I want to focus more on the format of the different types of material that you will have. And the library databases will have all kinds of formats. So books and ebooks are basically treated the same by APA. It used to be that they wanted you to specify the format in the citation. They no longer require that because for the most part, the content in a book or an ebook is going to be the same. There is an example at the end here of an audiobook where things get a little bit different. But chances are you're not going to be using audiobooks. So the example is there. I'm not going to really cover it right now though. So for a book, your reference is going to have the author's last name, his initials, same as with a journal article. You're going to have the year of publication. You're going to have the title of the book in italics, followed by the subtitle, if there is a subtitle. And the first word of the title and the first word of the subtitle will be capitalized. And then you're going to have the publisher and then the DOI or the URL. It used to be that they wanted you to have the publisher's location. A lot of times they're not listing things with the publisher location anymore. As more publishers move online or they become global enterprises, they're not including that information in it. It's actually kind of a challenge sometimes to find out where the publisher is. So you don't need to have the location anymore. For print books, a lot of times you're not going to have a URL because it's in print. And most of the time, I rarely have seen a DOI. Occasionally, I think the APA manual does actually have a DOI. So if there is one, you include the DOI. If it's an online book, then you include the URL. So for in this instance, we found a book that's in the public domain, meaning it's out of copyright. So it is available on Google. So you are able to include the URL for that. But if there's no DOI or no URL, then you just end with the publisher. It's a pretty simple looking reference. If you have a chapter in an edited book, so basically what this is referring to is if you have a book that has chapters where there's authors for each chapter, your reference is going to start off with the authors of the chapter. And same thing with your in-text citation is going to be the authors of the chapter. And the year of publication is going to be the same year because, chapter came out in the book. So it's the publication year of the book. And then you're going to have the chapter title in your reference. Then you're going to say it's in something. And then you kind of go back to your normal format of listing the creator of the book. So in this case, it's an edited book. So we have our special role here of editors after we've listed them. Notice that in this case, though, we're putting the first initials first and then their last name. Unlike here where you're using most of the time you're doing last name, comma, first initials, middle initials. So, but after the editors of the book or the authors of the book, you're going to have the title and you're going to have the page numbers and the publisher. Dictionaries and encyclopedias, same thing. If there is an author for the entry, so this might be in encyclopedias maybe more than dictionaries, where you have authors for the entries. So same thing, you're going to have the authors of the entry, the year that the book came out, the title of the entry, and then you're going to note that it's in something, so in, and then the authors or editors of the book that appears in, then the title of the book. And if there are edition numbers, you include that after the title. So the title of the book is usually italicized. The edition information is not italicized. And the publisher information. If it's not, so most of your dictionaries, for instance, they're not going to have authors in for each entry. And in this case, in this example that we're citing the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, medical dictionary in this case, there's no author. There's no author either for the entry or for the book. So you just start off with the entry title. But you do say that it's in the dictionary and the publisher. And then your in-text citation is going to reflect your reference, so it's also the title of the entry. So library databases, I am going to skip over Business Insights Global since the business resources are treated a little bit differently, but we've gone over the format basics for most of what's in our library databases. So on this library databases tab, you're going to have a table or subtabs for most of the library databases that the library has. So Credo and eBook Central, those are both going to contain ebooks, and we did just learn how to do a book and ebook citation. So each of these tabs is going to have the same basic information. So it's going to start off with a screenshot of the citation tool. So the citation tool generates the citation for you. That's one of the reasons we recommend that you use the library databases. So you don't have to try and build these yourself. You can just use the citation tool and then copy and paste it. You do have to make corrections. So that's why we also include the format for what's most likely in the database. So for Credo, it's a book reference. So this is book reference example. And then it has a screenshot of what the citation tool generates. So in this case, it's almost correct, but notice it has that URL at the end, and you don't need the URL for 7th edition APA. So you just delete that off. eBook Central, same thing. Here's the citation information. So with the cite tool in eBook Central, you do have to make sure that you're using the APA citation. Sometimes it defaults to something else. So in this case, there's a drop-down menu where you have to select APA. So in this case, it's almost correct what they've generated, but they did not capitalize Batman, which is a proper noun. So proper nouns would need to be capitalized, so you would correct that when you do your citation. And that is the number one thing that I think the citation tools get wrong, is the capitalization. It doesn't always catch either sometimes it capitalizes everything in the title, but it also sometimes does not catch the subtitle getting capitalized. And proper nouns, sometimes it just doesn't catch that either. I keep skipping over this first paragraph that appears in all these tabs, but basically database information is not included in most entries because APA says, most of the time you can find this information, you can find these sources in multiple databases. So the point of a reference is to tell the reader where the information is. It's not really to tell them how to get to that information, because there is a number of ways they can get to the information as long as they have the correct citation information. Let's go into EBSCO. So EBSCO, Gale and Opposing Viewpoints are going to be databases where you can find articles. So there's a cite button on the right, and there you have your journal article reference. It is possible that you can get ebooks in eBook Central, so in that case you would go and look at your ebook example, but generally you're pulling out articles, so there we have the article reference format. When you click that citation, that cite tool, a box will pop up and you actually have to scroll down in EBSCO to get to the APA reference, and then you can copy and paste it. And this one I think is almost right, except that they did not catch that subtitle the first word of the subtitle needs to be capitalized. So that's a very minor tweak. Business reports, I will go into that a little bit later when we talk about Business Insights Global. I am also going to pause here because in the example we have here, it had a DOI, but I want to show you where to get the permalinks if for some reason there is no DOI. So we jumped back to guides.centralpenn.edu. We're on the home page now, but if you hit Research Help and Tutorials and then click on this Online Resources in the Database tab. On the home page of this Online Resources guide, so this is guides.centralpenn.edu/online resources. If you scroll down, there's a box on how do I save my research, and this has screenshots of what the permalink buttons look like. So basically, when you're in a database, you don't want to use the URL that's up here in your address bar. The URLs that are up there are session-based, so they're not even going to work for you a lot of times the next time that you try to use them. The other problem is that it doesn't have our authentication information in it, so you're gonna, it either won't work at all, or you'll get a login page for EBSCO that you can't actually log into. So in Business Insights Global, it's going to be the share button, and see here we have our, this is actually our authentication information so that we actually get directed to mycentralpenn.edu, and you can log in and then be redirected into the specific article that you are linking to. In Credo, you're going to use this page link button, and then again, copy and paste that. eBooks Central, there's again, that similar looking chain link, and it says share link to book. And actually within eBook Central, you can also share to a specific chapter or page number. You just have to open the book to that specific page that you want, and then click that same share link button. EBSCO, it's going to be on the right, same place where your Cite tool button was. There's also your permalink, and that's going to pop up a box, and you would copy and paste that URL. Gale and opposing viewpoints, you're going to use the get link button. So real quick on how to get to the permalinks if you want to actually save the link to your book, or if your professor is telling you to use the links even though APA does not require you to use the links. That's how you get to them. Now the other thing is, if you are using this as a research tool where you're saving all your sources in a Word document and you want to be able to link to them, sometimes Word does do something to the links, to the permalinks. If you're finding that it's not working, the links aren't working when you're trying to access them off of a Word doc, turn that document into a PDF. Either open it as a PDF or save it as a PDF, and then for some reason it will work. I'm not entirely sure what the problem is, but Word does occasionally do something to links. Okay, we're back in the APA guide on library databases. We're on Gale and opposing viewpoints. Again, this is mostly journal articles, so there's the basic journal article format. This is an example of what Gale produces as a citation when you use the Cite tool, and where it's gone wrong. So again, it's including this retrieval URL information. In this case, that article does have a DOI, so you're going to use the DOI. The other thing that's a little odd is that for some reason their citation pulled up this 10 plus. Not sure why it did that when you're actually looking at the PDF of the article. So for Gale and opposing viewpoints, if you want, it'll open as a full text sort of thing on your web page. If you want the PDF, click the download button, and it will download as a PDF. So on the PDF, you can see that it's pages 10 to 13. So, you know, do what's more correct. Now we'll go into Films on Demand. You probably won't be citing too many videos. Films on Demand is a streaming video site. Academic Videos, Canopy is another one. In this case, there is a cite button underneath the video, and there's a box that will pop up. You select APA, and you can pull an APA supposedly cited reference, but it's very wrong. So for media, the correct APA citation should be the creator. In this case, there's a producer. So if you're on the videos page, you can see under the details who the producer is. You can see who the the copyright date is, and you're going to use the copyright date, not the date that it's added, the title of the video, and then you are going to include the format in brackets. There's also a way you can do a segment there at the end. If you have any questions about that, I'm not going to take too much time with this because most people are not using videos to cite things. All right, let's go into Business Insights Global. So I saved this for last because we're going to treat them a little bit differently. Usually when we're you can find articles here. I should clarify that. So, and you can use the cite button, and similar to Gale, it pulls up this URL. So you would just correct it for an article. You would treat anything you pull from Business Insights Global as an article. Most of the time, you're not going to be citing articles in Business Insights Global. You're going to be finding company information, financial information, industry reports, SWOT analysis, things like that. This is also the case if you're using Business Search Premier in EBSCO, or if you're using the business searching interface of EBSCO, it takes you into Business Search Premier. It's a little bit of a different look. So basically with company information, financials, things like that, you can find that information in a number of different places. But a lot of times the information, even when it looks like it's the same report, it might be presented slightly differently. So this is where I say, and this is my rule because APA is not clear on this, this is where I say to go ahead and include the database name. So I said before you don't usually include that because you can find this information in a number of places. I'm going to say make an exception. If your professor tells you to do something different, do something different. The additional little twist with business information is that you have to figure out if it's static. So if it's a report and it has a year and a month and a day, so you're going to use whoever the author is. Usually it's an organization or some sort of analyst, industry analyst. You're going to have the year, the month, the day of publication like you would normally. You're going to have the title of the report, and then you're going to have the type of report, so in brackets. So if it's an industry report, an investment report, you're going to put that in brackets. You're going to have the database name. If it's a report that's static, so that information's not going to change, that's all you need to have. But if you're citing something like company financials, so financials are usually going to update, hopefully, unless they go out of business. They should update. They should update at least quarterly. So in that example, you're going to have that same information as the other one, but here you're also going to include the retrieval date. So when the information updates, that's when you include your retrieval date. So I jumped into Business Insights Global. We're looking at a SWOT report. So basically you go into companies and then you can pull SWOT reports and then you can enter the name of a company or just use their A to Z index to find one. I wanted to emphasize that you cite what you are actually looking at, not the results screen. So in this case, it says Starbucks Corporation SWOT analysis report, but when you open up that PDF, you actually see it says Starbucks Corporation Financial and Strategic Analysis Review. This is your actual title. So you're going to use the actual title in your citation. So again, here's our example for Starbucks using the title that's actually on the report. I will also point out that global data, which is in Business Insights Global, and MarketLine reports you can find in EBSCO's Business Source Premier. You'll find that if you're using the business searching interface of EBSCO. Both of those are available on their own sites, but you have to pay for them. So the rule is you use the URL, but only if it's a workable URL. So if you're going to hit a paywall where they're going to ask you to pay for the article or the report, or if you have to be a subscriber, you have to log in, then it doesn't work. APA does not want you using URLs like that. So again, that's why I'm saying go ahead and use the database name. We're making a little inference into what APA wants. So we have access to these sources. We have access to this database. So this is where you're going to be able to access that information. You could possibly also put that permalink in there. We just went over how to find the permalinks. So it's possible that your professor will say, go ahead and use the permalink rather than the database name. Either way works. one of the things some of you may have noticed is that there is no box for Westlaw. Legal studies and paralegal students may have noticed that. That is because Westlaw unfortunately does not have a cite tool. They also don't really use APA. They use the Blue Book for citation. Actually, APA refers to the Blue Book for legal citations. So if you have any questions about legal citations, just let us know. We will be happy to help you with your legal citations. Okay, we're going to skip down to websites. We saved that for last because we're hoping you save these for last. A lot of times people, I think, using websites is so much faster because you can just get on your search engine and type in whatever your topic is and get a bunch of results. It does end up taking more time in the end. And that is because you have to vet the site. Is this really information that you should use? And how you can figure that out is if you go back to that guides.centralpenn.edu homepage and into the research help tutorials, there is a guide for how to evaluate a website. So again, it's much faster if you just use the library databases where the information is already, kind of been vetted probably for scholarly journals at least, where it has the citation tool, because the other thing that takes a lot of time is finding this information that you should have in your citations. So generally this is as much, you put in as much information as you have. Ideally you have an author, you have a date of publication, you have a title, so that's the minimum that you need. I will throw in here that if you can't really find an author for what you're looking at on a website or a date, you might want to rethink whether or not you should be using it as a source. But anyway, so if there is no author, the author again might be a government department, it might be the staff of an organization, it could be the organization, it could be a committee, it's not necessarily a person, but you put them in there. Then you want their date, the date of publication. Again, as much information as they provide. If there's only a year, only put a year. Try not to speculate on the dates. For dates, ideally you're not using the copyright date for the entire site because that doesn't necessarily correspond to the page that you're referencing. Last updated date. So in this case, we do actually have that. I just updated this website not too long ago. So last updated date is okay. APA prefers not to have the last reviewed date because that just means it was looked at. It doesn't necessarily mean that any content was added or changed to it. I wouldn't get too hung up on it. If you can find any date at all, that's great. If there is no date, then again, you use that n.d. for no date. And then so you're going to have your author, you're going to have the date, you're going to have the title of the document. And then if the site name is different from the author, you include the site name. So in this case, from the U.S. Department of State, the site is the same as the author. So we don't include that information. Basically, APA doesn't want you repeating yourself unnecessarily. If the information is going to change, so in this case, the China's travel advisory, that will probably change. You're going to include the retrieval date and then the URL. And if the information is not going to change, then you don't have to worry about retrieval times. Actually, we're going to skip over PDF. PDFs are actually a lot like websites. Same information, except that your URL is going to end with a PDF. Media. So media can cover a huge range of material. So this is images, videos, movies, can include social media. There are a ton of examples in the manual. We only have a couple here. But so if you need help, contact us. But basically, you're going to cite what you have. So the creator's name, the creator's contribution. So sometimes it's, if it's just a song, it's just them. So like example for Avengers, for the movie Avengers, we're going to cite Joss Whedon as the director. You could also have a producer in here. In this case, I think this is a podcast or a radio show, so you're going to cite the host, and then you're going to have the date, you're going to have the title of the work, and then you're going to have the medium. So if it's a video, it's going to be in brackets, the medium's going to be in brackets. The photograph, it's a video. Production company would come after that. Sometimes there's more than one. You do list all of them. So if you are actually in a location like a museum looking at a painting, in this case, you're gonna, instead of a publisher, you're gonna cite the museum location. If you're looking at it online, then you have the URL. Again, you can contact us if you need help with this. But basically, if you are using images, you are supposed to have an in-text citation for any images that you use and a corresponding reference. Other types of sources, so class material. Class material could be things like, you want to cite the PowerPoints that were uploaded to your class. You can do that. So there's your basic information. So again, this is where it's typically more like personal communications where most people wouldn't have access to it. In this case, the person probably reading your paper is going to be your professor, and they do have access to your course, and they do have access to your PowerPoint. So in this case, your site is going to be Blackboard at Central Penn College, and the URL you're going to use is just mycentralpenn.edu. Don't try to use the URL like within Blackboard. I don't think that would work. So you just use the login page for Blackboard or for single sign-on. Reports. So reports are kind of treated like anything else where you have your author of the year, you have your title. The only thing is that after the title, you're going to put the report number in parentheses. So if you have a report number, include it. Legal materials, again, if you need help with legal reference, just let us know. It's a completely different system of citation since it does refer to the Blue Book rather than APA building their own legal citations. After this, we kind of go into just some basics that APA wants with your writing within an APA paper. So they want active voice rather than passive voice. There's some examples of what we mean by that. They want you to be pretty succinct and clear and unbiased. So you just kind of keep your writing simple and uncomplicated. And the number is capitalization and italics. So this is when you have to spell out the word of a number rather than just using the number, a number. So there are specifics for that. When you should capitalize, when you need to italicize. Additional resources. So I highly recommend the APA Style and Grammar Guide. There's a link to it. It has a lot of examples in there of what things should look like. So if you're not finding an example here, you can look there. OWL at Purdue, that's another one that we have recommended for you. It's the online writing lab of Purdue University. The Academic Writer Tutorial is exactly what it says. It's a tutorial going through everything within an APA style paper. It's pretty lengthy, but it's pretty thorough. And then we also have some information on how to use the citation tools in Google Docs and Microsoft Word. So we would be happy to hear from you. If you have any questions, please let us know. Remember, on the home page of the guide and on the library tab of Blackboard, there is a chat widget where you can ask us questions as they come up. We'll be happy to hear from you.